Amigos e amigas, bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Bem-vindos a mais uma entrevista e encontro do Paraty em Foco 2022. É sempre um prazer participar do festival, e esse festival que já tem tantos anos e sempre teve e continua tendo uma importância no cenário da fotografia brasileira. Hoje nós vamos conversar com Ahmet Polat, que é um fotógrafo que nasceu em 1972, é um fotógrafo que nasceu na Holanda e tem uma ligação muito grande com a Turquia, da qual ele vai falar. Também tem uma ligação com o Brasil e tem uma longa trajetória, apesar de ser um fotógrafo novo, né, 44 anos de idade somente, tem uma trajetória muito longa, que também ele vai falar. A fotografia dele é muito expandida, se a gente pode dizer dessa forma, engloba fotografia documental, fotografia de moda, fotografia de retrato, uma espécie de fotografia vernacular também, mas mais do que tudo, o Ahmet é um fotógrafo que pretende construir pontes, né? E a gente mais do que nunca está precisando de construir pontes, né? Pontes baseadas em empatia e também na fotografia, na arte, na cultura e um respeito mútuo entre as culturas. Isso é uma coisa muito importante e essa é uma das mais nobres e importantes funções da fotografia desde que a fotografia foi descoberta e inventada lá nas primeiras décadas do século XIX. Então, vou ler um pedacinho aqui de um texto que está no site dele, que é um texto que resume bem a proposta do Ahmet como fotógrafo, como artista, como CEO de uma fundação, como educador, né, e como esse construtor de pontes entre culturas. E aqui diz: através de sua fotografia e trabalho de campo, Ahmet Polat aspira a construir pontes entre diferentes culturas, identidades e histórias. Depois de viver e trabalhar em Istambul por 10 anos, ele retornou à Holanda em 2015 e foi premiado com a Laureate Photographer of the Nation no mesmo ano. Seu trabalho é exibido internacionalmente em importantes museus da Holanda, em Istambul, no Beaux-Arts em Brussels, na Bélgica, e com o estúdio Polat Foundation, Ahmet deseja instigar, estimular e apoiar colaborações e benefícios mútuos entre várias disciplinas e mundos criativos. Então, com vocês, Ahmet Polat. Ahmet, it's such a good pleasure to see you again and to talk to you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the wonderful introduction, Paulo.
I believe you understood my Portuguese, but because you do understand Portuguese and you speak a little.
I had to learn when I went to São Paulo many years ago. Mm-hmm. I have to get used to the ear again, listening to you. But I was getting most of what you were talking about, so it was good.
So you got the compliments. You understood the compliments.
That's exactly what I understood. Yes.
Very good. Let me ask one thing. I mentioned this bridge between cultures, and you are a good example of a photographer, an artist, and a culture producer that lives between two cultures, among many cultures. But you lived in Istanbul. You were born in Holland, but your family is from Turkey. I would like to start right there. How does it, those two cultures, how do they live inside of your brain, your thoughts, and your soul, and your photography?
Yeah, you start with the easiest question, Paulo. So thanks again also for that. No, it's it's the base of I think of all the work that I'm doing. But I remember the first time I came to Brazil, I saw many people like myself who incorporated either through music, to food, through art, different aspects of different references of culture. So it was very important for me to come to Brazil and also work there to understand that there's more people like me around the world. Even though when you live in Europe, it can feel sometimes you're just one of the few people with this diverse background. Now, the specific backgrounds that I have is a traditional Protestant Dutch history, which is also connected somehow to Brazil, and we may touch upon that as well. And on the other side, I have a very international, almost Islamic, Ottoman, but also very modern Turkish side, which is part of me, and I enjoy both histories within myself. But it took me quite a long time to have those both cultures and those different perspectives incorporated in me, and photography helped me to build that connection. So I use photography to go and research my Turkish ancestry, but also I was working in Holland on my Dutch heritage as well. And I think the lessons I learned from this to work in these different disciplines is something I still do today. Um, yeah, and I, keep this philosophy in most of my work. So, besides becoming more a documentary photographer, I also got inspired to do different avenues. So right now I'm doing film, for example. I'm working in theater. Just today I heard we are making my second play with my good friend Rashif El-Kawi, a Flemish Moroccan writer, theater maker. We're going to make another play, and it's going to be about photography. So I'm very excited about that. But I also work in education. I work in fashion. All these different worlds is part of my, how you say that, the stories that I make.
Then let me ask one thing. Do you think? I think we mentioned that the last time we talked, that photography has always traditionally has been seen as two things. Let's say has two aspects. It has many aspects, of course, many layers, but we refer to photography as either being a mirror or a window. And you were born in 1978, so I don't know when you started photography, but around 1995, four, that's when internet was built, invented, or was available for everybody. And at the same time, digital photography came to life around 1995, same thing. So I believe when you started photographing, was at the same time as the website, the internet, and the digital photography. Isn't that so?
So I started I don't know how normally people start. I had a camera from my father. It was a Canon AE1 he had owned for a long time. I didn't know he was interested in photography at all, but I found this camera and it was his camera. And I learned by making with film. I even used my own rolls of film, like 40 meter, and put them in a cartridge. Even my hands, they still do this. You know what I mean when I do this? You know that you are worked in a dark room when I do this, because I'm putting the film in the dark room on the metal spool. So I learned the traditional way. I was in a dark room. I enjoyed creating stories that I didn't know beforehand that would come out, and the magic of the bath, and then seeing the first prints or seeing the first contact sheet, and then go with the loop and then checking, oh yeah, this is magic, there's something going on, and use your little marker or cross, whatever, and you said like this could be interesting. And then you started working on the print and working on the print, understanding that it takes time, not just to make a print. You can have a print in 5 seconds. Sure. To work on it and to emphasize and use shadows and use your hands to cover, or sometimes use the light to go through, and then to emphasize parts of the story. That helped me understand photography more and more. And while I was learning this process, and I learned this all in the art school. I want to go to arts. in Sint-Joost in the south of Holland. And in those 4 years, my love for storytelling and photography was very analog. The photographers that taught me were very, very analog. They were all about craft and skills. But at the same time, the first digital cameras were coming. And the first digital cameras made it easier and quicker, even though it was low resolution, but you could foresee that storytelling would be more accessible to more people. And then with the cellular phone, the combination of direct representation of yourself on an image on a phone, well, that created a whole different story. Now everybody can be a photographer.
That is
So
true.
in this process of growing into that, I was very aware of the crafts and the skills and the tradition, but I was also growing in the role and the position as a photographer. What is the difference between me holding a camera and everybody else having a camera on their phone? So this question was already there in the beginning.
Everybody can be a photographer, like you said, because of the cell phone, but that doesn't mean that the photographs that everybody does have a meaning for everybody else. That's a different thing. I think it's good that everybody has a camera in their cell phone, but I want to go back to the beginning of my question. Is that, do you think that the digital photography and the internet not only changed photography, but it changed the way we perceive what photography can do? And then I go back again to the mirror and the window. Has photography become more of a mirror than a window, or no? It depends who's clicking.
Oh, photography has totally changed. The value itself, the value of the image, the way the big agencies deal with photography has devaluated. We know that as a profession, it's very difficult to live after the image itself, the skill itself, the craft itself is devaluated. But the need for good storytellers, the need for people who can show parts of the world and make it accessible for a bigger and wider audience, that demand has risen. And the people that are good storytellers, they have a different job now, not just to take good technical images, but also to, to be an ambassador for the story, an ambassador to this world. Now, in a simple way, if you look at influencers that has come out of this digital world with social media and combination, so yeah, the impact is simple. This person is photographing themselves, and everything that they do and people like, they follow. So that is the meaning of this image. This is their lives that you're looking at. That has a certain kind of meaning. And I think that is fine. It's okay. It's not how I use the medium. It's not what I like to look at or what I consume, but I understand this. It's the same way I look at fashion. You have fashion photography on many different levels. You have a catalog. They're trying to sell clothing. It's fashion. But you also have Harper's Bazaar. You have Vogue. They're telling stories. It's also fashion. So
It's
this
also
is the different levels in photography. You have documentary where somebody's going out and he's going to make a reportage, for example, in the Amazon, and they only take some superficial images of the native community who are sitting on the side of the road, who are selling beads or trinkets to tourism. And this person says, "Oh, this is the native community of the Amazon," and you and I already know, no, it's not.
it's not.
This person didn't do any in-depth research. This person didn't live with them. He didn't understand what they're doing there. So there's different levels to documentary, and we need to be aware of this, and we need to, if possible, also share this awareness and educate where we can about the differences.
Yeah, and I think photography has become, because of the digital, because of internet, has become even more a more powerful tool for education.
So exactly. So to come back to your question about a window and a mirror, sometimes it can be a window into a world. Sometimes it is a reflection on yourself as a person, but sometimes it's also a facade to hide.
Uh-huh.
So what we see now, there is something new because of social media, because of the facade that people create. You think that when you look at people's lives, that this is the real life. And then you figure out that people maybe who are looking happy in their photos all the time can be very unhappy and maybe even depressed. So we understand this. We also see there is much more diversity than we have seen before. So this is something that I'm very happy about, that I see more different stories. I know more about Brazilian photographers and what's going on because of the social media. I can follow them on Instagram, on our Facebook or Twitter. So I know more about what's going on. I don't have to just wait for New York Times to make a special issue on 5 Brazilian photographers that they want to do every 15 years. There
Uh-huh.
is more female photographers now. Finally, more women. I know we're all men here, you and me, and maybe, I hope there is going to be more female photographers. I think you always try to do that, have a more inclusive festival. I think it's very important. I'm not saying that, you know, that certain photo shoots can only be done by certain people, but I want to see different perspectives and different perceptions. I want to feel the different windows that we can look through. So that is very important as well. Yeah, before I start with the project, I want to say one more thing. We're not only educators or curators, we're also students. And because of the accessibility, I am studying more today, still after 25 years, than maybe in the beginning of photography.
Oh, totally. And the pandemic brought that even closer to us, I think.
Well, for me, it's part of what I do in general. I try to learn as much as I can, and I still use photography as a tool to learn, a tool to edit, to curate, to express, to share, to facilitate. So, one of the things that happened, and maybe it's good to go to the story that you just mentioned, Dark Moon, the project, is something it started almost 17 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and I got involved with a young community in the south of Izmir through this man that I met. His name is Mustafa Opak.
Uh-huh.
I read this article also, and I think I still have this article also in here as well. But I heard that there was a community of African descendants living in the south of Turkey, who had created this kind of like festivity, which was called Dana Bayram. And I think this article talks about it, that there are like 5,000 Afro-Turkish people living in the south who are celebrating their African heritage. And this was all set up by this one man, Mustafa Olpak. If you go next, you'll see him in a photo in the newspaper. And I called him because I found his number online. Again, this was my access to the story, and to say I'm coming to Izmir, the city where the community was mostly living, and I would love to meet him. Now, this whole reason for me to meet him was because not because I saw just a story, but also because I was personally engaged with who's currently my wife from the Caribbean area, from Barbados, and we talked about our ancestry and background, and also about racism and colorism. And I said, well, how do I get to understand this is a concept? Some of the concepts were not something that I was innate to. If you look at me, I can be very much seen as a white Italian or whatever, but
Brazilian. You could be
even
Brazilian.
Brazilian. Yes, yes. Argentinian. I was in Brazil. They would see me as Argentinian. And I said to my wife, but I don't feel this way, but I understand that people perceive me this way. This was very important. But when I was in Turkey living with her, I said I have to understand this. The only way for me is to connect through photography. So I met with Mustafa Opak. Maybe we can go a little bit further to the images. And he's the founder. He's sitting there left. Somebody's pointing to him. He's sitting on a chair. Wonderful black and white image that I shot with the one of my medium format cameras at that time. And Mustafa was, in a way, the ambassador to a whole history that was forgotten. The Afro-Turkish community have been in the Ottoman Empire and in Turkey from the beginning, but because Turkey, that was a republic, started in 1923, everybody who lived in this republic, this young republic, was Turkish, and their heritage was forgotten or denied. That depends on how you want to look at it. But the heritage of the Afro-Turkish community wasn't talked about. Nobody wanted to share the history because it was a painful history. Something maybe that in Brazil I recognize that when it comes to the history, the slave history of people, that it's a very heavy burden to talk about sometimes, that you don't easily pass on to new generations. But Mustafa Opak said, I find it very important to discuss this. I want to share this history with the children and the grandchildren so they understand at least why they may look the way they look, and that they also have another history and a story that's part of them. So this is, again, something you mentioned, this different perspective that you have inside of you. And I started saying like, well, how can I help you? And what role can photography play in this process? Because I wasn't there just to take photos. I said, I was very aware at that time, what am I doing with this? What can I give when I work with photography? And he said two things. He said, I don't want you to make it political, because if we talk about minorities in Turkey, it's a very complex conversation and it can become very political. So I would like it to be about culture. That's very important. And I want you to make these images into some kind of archive available for the next generation. So I started photographing together with him. He met with many people in the Izmir area, as we see these next images. The girl on the left, his name is Sultana, and she's one of the people we met and photographed, who was living in the center of Izmir. And we went to different villages also outside of the Izmir area. And we discovered or rediscovered, because they were always there, that the community of the Afro-Turks is much bigger than people would assume, because it's not just only defined by skin color. It's defined by stories, and it's defined by family bonds. And this is something very specific that I found very interesting. So what am I photographing? I'm not just photographing, just say clearly, African-looking Turkish people. No. A lot of people would say, like, I didn't even know I had the heritage. But it's because of Mustafa Opak that I started looking, and then I understand that my grandmother was of African descent. But I never thought about this. But that was very interesting, you know, to see what role can photography have in this story. What role does it have to build a new narrative?
So you're photographing a culture within a culture.
Yes, the biggest challenge was that a lot of people living in Turkey are all feeling that they're Turkish. This young man we're seeing here, he sees himself as Turkish. Obviously, he has very strong African features as well, but that's not part of his narrative. He didn't learn about this background, but he deals with the background because he is perceived that way. So the person that So Mustafa Olpak, you know, he has given them like more like a narrative to pass them on this history. Also teaching them about music, about culture, but maybe sometimes also very simple about how to use coconut butter and those kind of things. You know, there's lots of things when we talk about culture. And
Ahmed,
um,
why is it called Dark Moon?
well, that's so um, when I started photographing, I realized I had to change something also, that I didn't want it just to be about taking photos, and I started doing a lot of research. And in Turkey, there was not that many people. My friends, academics or historians, didn't know that much about this history. People in the art world didn't know. But I didn't. I did find one name. Her name is Esmeray. Esmeray is translated Dark Moon. She's a singer actress that everybody used to know in the past. She was a famous television actress for many years, and her songs were quite famous. So I found out that she didn't live anymore. But as an ode, like to one artist, I wanted to call, like, have her name as a inspiration. So that is what you see here. Is the name Esmeray means dark moon, and it's an inspiration for generations after her. That's why I
And it's also a
choose the
beautiful
name.
name, Dark Moon.
Yeah, for it's double. You know, it can be
It has double
interpreted
meaning.
in many different ways. Yeah, but I try to emphasize the poetic, and I did talk to the son of Esmeray that I got to know, and told him about this project, and he was okay with it. So it's not something I just used without permission or did without any thought. Every step on the way, I thought about what is the next step, and every step on the way, I thought about what I can do with the work that I'm doing. So this is something that I, you know, realized also. I said I need to work on something like an archive, something sustainable, something that I can give back to the community. So you see one of the images, izler, which means traces, is to incorporate vernacular photography, the work collecting images from personal archives, and we've incorporated all these works in this exhibition. We asked for people to give their work and give their archives. We went to people's houses to scan images, to find images, to build this archive that was not just my photography, but their history has been part of Turkish history for decades, and that was very important to build this archive. We go to the next one. Some of the people in the images you see were known to people, but a lot of people didn't even know about each other. So to have this opening, to have this celebration, you see a lady here. Her name is Beyhan. At that time, it was the first time she ever went to an exhibition about her own heritage. She didn't know anything about the community. Now she is one of the head of the organization. After so many years, she became the secretary of the Afro-Turkish Association. So this bringing people together through art with these events was very important for me and also for the community as well. If you go to the next one, I think this is a quite a known fellow. He has been to the festival maybe in previous years. His name is Eric Bruns, also from Amsterdam. And in the beginning, I asked him to help me out as a curator to also work with the photography when we were collecting it. And if you go to the next one, you see some of the images here that we collected in this exhibition. And it was very surprisingly a lot of work, a lot of images that people didn't know that they have. And it goes from portraits to wedding photos to sports photos to just family pictures. But also sometimes people would do interesting things in studio photography that they like to do. And those were also, again, very inspiring to work with. Uh, and it inspired us to do this work. Now,
To
if I
photograph the
go
people
into this,
themselves.
yes, but this collecting the images helped me to make a change in my adjust myself. I had to focus and said, instead of doing documentary, I'm maybe going to do studio photography. And the studio came as an inspiration from the work that we collected. So the studio photographs, something I organized it myself in one of the festivities. We made an outdoor studios. We made photos. The photos were given back to the people, so they had images themselves. And this is how we start building an archive with portraits. And then a few years later, if you go through the studio photograph, we printed all the work and made an exhibition with the same images, and then show it also in the community during the festivities. So we have all these photos that were taken and then also used to exhibit again in the same area, not in a white cube, not in a gallery, not in a museum, but during the festivities in a park. And you see some of the images later on. It was very important for me to always give something back to the community, and to use this work to be given back to them as well.
So it's a kind of the mirror effect that we were talking about earlier.
It's important. I think representation and being represented. Many people would come and said, "I've never seen myself in this way. I've never seen others like me in this way." Representation is a big responsibility of the work that we as photographers should do, which is the difference between us and the social media in a sense. Yeah.
Because photography, Ahmed, in a way, it certifies that that person lived. That life has a meaning. You know, in Brazil, it was very common that when a person died, the family had that person photographed, because he was not, or she was not photographed during their whole life. So having an image of that person, even though she's already dead, certified that she lived, that she had an importance, that she was a human being, she had a value for that community. Because so photography as a way of being preserved forever, that life preserved. And I think that's very important.
I think that's beautiful. You mentioned that we have different traditions and different way of working with photography all over the world. And that's the good thing about this new era, where we can learn from each other and share experiences and talk about how we use photography in our own cultures with our own references. So within this one, when we talk about representation, it's something we try to do while they're living, and also celebrate them while they're living, not after the fact. So having the exhibition in their park during one of the festivities of the Afro-Turkish Foundation, it's something to give back to the community. And for example, if you go to the next image, you will see an elderly lady. She heard about the project and she brought her old pictures of her ancestors with her to the picnic to share to other people of African descent, to show that she is from the same heritage, and shared it with them. So you see how this inspired a new generation again to talk about it. Don't forget, it was only a few years before that nobody wanted to talk about it and they were not interested. And now through this work, it became much more something that people talked about. Now, and even after this exhibition we did in the park, more and more interest was grown, and there was articles written about it. There was in the how you say that, in the mainstream media, articles were written about it, but not in sometimes before it was much more disrespectful the way the media would work, and they would just go and say, "Oh, this is a funny story," or photographers would come and go like, "Oh, this is something we can sell." No, it was the work that we did together with the community was something to be proud of, and it was about their heritage, and it was about empowering their story. So you will see the newspaper, it's called Radical. They did a front page and a double spread about their story in the mainstream media. And I think these things are very important as well. How you use your images and how you pass it on and how you position it and how you contextualize it is also part of our job. I believe our responsibility.
Bem-vindos, bem-vindes. Tivemos que trocar aqui o cenário, como vocês estão vendo, o Ahmet saiu daquela linda sala azul que ele estava e agora está do lado de fora, lá em Amsterdã. Ahmet, we're talking about the Dark Moon project, and the last part was you're talking about recognition.
Thanks, Paulo, and sorry about the inconvenience. In the backdrop, I'm in Artis, which is one of the 5 oldest zoos in the world. So I chose for a different color backdrop immediately. Yeah, working on this project together with the Afro-Turkish community now for 17 years. It is important to have, like I said, something to give back. So every exhibition we did, it was something we did with together with the community. Every publication we did was something that it was not just for the photography or the art world, it was also something for the community. So when we worked in the beginning on building up the archive, I thought it was going to be a digital archive first. But then I realized people that from the older generation, they didn't have smartphones. They had old Nokias or Siemens with no screen. So I said they don't have access. They don't use internet like the youth does. So maybe we have to give something different. And the biggest thing I saw that everybody would use was a newspaper. So instead of making an archive digitally, we made a newspaper about the research we did in the previous years. And again, after having the exhibition 1 year later, we made a publication and we gave it also to the Afro-Turkish community to give to their community again and to share this story with everybody else. So that is something that, hey, little buddy. Sorry, there's kids coming by here playing here in the waterfall as well. Um, so we were giving this to the Afro-Turkish community for them also to, to hand it out and to have it in their hands, something tangible, something that they could share. And within all the years that we work together, we try to continue this. Every exhibition we make, we work together. Every exhibition we did here in Amsterdam, together with Foam, with them, we did together. Even the exhibition that we are now doing in Brazil, we did together. I asked them permission to have this exhibition in Rio. They were very happy about sharing their story, but they're also very weary that it's done in the right way. So in the images you see Mustafa Opak sharing the magazine with the young community. But sadly, Mustafa Opak passed away 4 years ago. So our friendship continues even though he's not here anymore. And his ideals and ideas are with me. I still try to keep my promise to him to do this together with the young generation working in the foundation. Um, so this his ideas and ideals are very important for me. Important that I keep that alive. So even we're doing an exhibition in Brazil with you, all of you. I want them to be involved. So I keep them involved by, for example, asking them with all the names that you chose the images to show. I want to check with them everything we do, and we will continue doing that in the coming years, hopefully.
So, Ahmed, is Dark Moon is a kind of a ongoing project. It's a non-stop project.
Yes, my goal would be 20 years to make a publication, to make something, to finish something in the end that we can do together with the new generation. So, as you can see here, a younger generation of Afro-Turkish descendants are getting involved. They're looking at their own heritage through clothing, to fashion, to music, and now also to photography. The images that we're exhibiting in Sao Paulo, or sorry, in Brazil, are the images that we made, I think, more than 12 years ago in Izmir, but also the images that we made a few months ago. So I was in Izmir together with the new generation, and they decided on the clothing that they wanted to have. They decided on the kind of images that they wanted to make, and that's how we curated the show that we are now showing in the festival. Um, and I want to continue working with them, maybe also on a documentary film. So that is the next step. And then the Dernek, the foundation, will be existing more than 20 years very soon. So hopefully we can celebrate this also with the publication.
Okay, that's great. And photography, like we said in the beginning, as a tool of understanding oneself and uh, building a bridge based on empathy and based on the respect of different cultures and looking into the future.
Yes. What's the question? Sorry, Paulo.
No, it was not a question, it's just a statement.
Yeah, I thought so.
But it can be
Look,
a
the
question
thing.
too.
No, I mean,
I'm pretty sure you see photography this way also. Photography can be and should be much more than just taking pictures.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, we are, of course, I love a beautiful constructed image. I love when the decisive moment, whatever that decisive moment is, comes together with the aesthetic and the composition and the emotion and the color and the light of the image. That is also a joy I have. But I also have to understand that I am in function of the medium. The medium right now needs something different. It needs to be contextualized. It needs to be repositioned historically. We cannot only live by the romantic perspectives that were given to us by our previous generation, even though it was very inspiring. It's not
Yeah.
enough. So we, as a new generation, have to continue working on the medium to make it relevant again, to understand the urgency of the medium that we use and the responsibility that we carry. And that
Mhm.
means that sometimes you have to get out of. Sorry, some parents are standing behind me. That
That's
we
the
have
joy of
to
life.
be aware of our surrounding and adapt, and that's what our responsibility is.
Indeed. Oh, Ahmed, thanks very much for the interview. I hope to see you soon. And maybe in Brazil, maybe in Amsterdam, maybe in Turkey. I don't know. So we can talk
Inshallah, we
again.
say, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay. Thanks very much.
One more thing, I want to thank you, the organization, for inviting me to have me there. I know I wanted to be there as well, but we are currently also showing a film that I worked on in a festival here in Holland. So I hope people, are okay with me not being there. But I appreciate the time and the effort also that you all put in, and also to showcase this history
Mhm.
of African Turkish history that not a lot of people know yet. So I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. And we are eager to see your next story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.